System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Friday, August 8th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Moja, Lil Tanky, Sumler. Moja, hello, happy Friday. How are you? What's the news? What's the word on the street?
Man, 69% of people in Ukraine favor an immediate ceasefire. Just news in passing. 69%. That's nasty.
Wow. Okay. Well, everyone, that's how we're going to start off today with a random fact. But we're not going to be talking about Russia and Ukraine, although I do appreciate that little tidbit. This is the big news for today. Lebanese cabinet approves objectives of U.S. plan to disarm Hezbollah. You knew something like this was going to be coming soon. Group warns U.S.-driven plans bow to interests of Israel, which continue to carry out near daily violations of the truce. Also, as you probably know, at this point, not going well right now with the Lebanese public. Massive protests across Beirut and other parts of Lebanon. You can see it right here, Tanky. Kind of as far as the eye can see. For our podcast listeners, this is in Beirut, and it's just protesters as far as the eye can see. Give us some context. What are your thoughts on this? What's going to happen? Is it major?
I mean, here's the thing. I think about the great lie, right, as it relates to democracy in the Middle East, and it's that Israel's the only democracy, which is not true. Kuwait votes, you know what I'm saying? There's at any rate, Syria up until quite recently voted. Lebanon votes. Lebanon has this weird policy that was set up by the French almost 100 years ago. It's a majority Muslim nation, but they split the voting so that 30% of the government is made up of Shia Muslims. Another 30% is made up of Sunni Muslims. So you can see that's 60% of the government. But the presidency has to always be a Christian, right? So that's 40%. So 60% of the country is Muslim. But they've been ruled essentially for the last 100 years mandatory by a Christian president. Okay, and that's essentially to keep there from ever really being a Muslim in control, right, while they worked out the Greater Israel Project. What you see in the streets is the result of that, because the bottom line is whenever Israel chooses to invade, impact, bomb, assassinate anyone in Lebanon, it's never the Lebanese military that's found fighting them. They're complicit. At the most non-conspiratorial view I could give you is they're grossly incompetent. The Lebanese military is grossly incompetent. That's the least conspiratorial view. At best, they're out and out collaborators with the IDF, and really the only resistance that you see when it comes to protecting Lebanon has been the Northern Resistance. And so when you see this new president come in, who was handpicked by the Americans, handpicked by Witkoff and Trump, huge ties to America. Okay. And the first thing he says is like, Hezbollah has to disarm. The people know where that's coming from. Hezbollah knows where that's coming from. It's not coming, so the thing I was reading was the general consensus was like, we're just going to act like that order never came so that we never have to act like our president is a collaborator with the foreign. You know what I'm saying? I mean, word on the Arab Street is crazy right now. And that's manifesting as you're looking at, these videos of just countless hordes of people walking through the streets because they understand a disarmament at this point would mean straight up surrender because the military is not going to help them. UNIFIL, which is the United Nations peacekeepers, they're not going to help them. Within the last year, the IDF has bombed the UNIFIL, the United Nations peacekeepers. They've broken the violation of the ceasefire multiple times. There has not been a day where the IDF didn't violate the ceasefire with Lebanon since that ceasefire has been signed. It would fall on the government to utilize the military to disencourage Israel to continue to violate their sanctity, the sanctity of their sovereignty. But that's just not happening. When resistance happens, it's only ever from the band that the government is ordering to be disbanded. So I think what they're trying to do is they're low-key trying to push, not even low-key, they're high-key trying to destabilize Lebanon with a civil war, in which case, they would be, and honestly, it's not a bad idea. It's a good time to do it because they're less connected to Iran than they've ever been, with Syria out of play. And better than that, right, as far as the IDF and the Americans go, you control the Syrians. So it's not just, Hezbollah versus the government of Lebanon. It's them versus all the covert support that you can get from the IDF, from the Americans, from NATO. You'll see more military arms go to Lebanon than you've ever seen before, and all while also being hammered from the top, right, from HTS. I mean, the government of Syria.
Speaking of the government of Syria, let's talk about what happens when you have weak governments, and I don't want to be again, to go on Assad again, because obviously he had a tough task. However you feel about him is how you feel about him. But Syria, Palestine, not safer places now that Assad is
They're
gone.
not better places.
Yeah, exactly. They're not better places. So this is so can you talk just a little bit about what Hezbollah, what their role is in Lebanon, and in comparison to sort of the roles that maybe the Ansarallah movement in Yemen have, or even Hamas in Palestine, and sort of like what they mean sort of to the community of Lebanon and its security. Yeah.
Without condoning or condemning, you know what I'm saying? They are a popular resistance faction that are mostly of the Shia faith. You know what I'm saying? That have been active in Lebanon since the time of Ronald Reagan. Their first major action was the bombing of the barracks. I believe back in '84, where like several hundred Marines instantly died. And it was at that moment Ronald Reagan packed up all them Americans out of Lebanon and got them the fuck out of Dodge,
Because let's not forget that Americans were in Syria, a great portion of Syria. And this is
right. But this is Lebanon, though. This is
that's
Ronald
what I'm
Reagan.
saying. Right. What I'm saying is difficult to maintain that, that land, and the security of that land when there's militia forces, unlike Syria, which, didn't have the ability to fight back.
Yeah. And so that's what they've been. They've been a popular resistance movement in Lebanon that's been active since at least the 80s. They are one of the premier guerrilla fighting forces probably in the world. I think they probably could go toe to toe with any group. I think if you throw them into Ukraine, them and the Azov Brigade would go toe to toe as far as guerrilla brigades and how to work within like urban infrastructure, an army that knows how to disappear into the countryside, right? Asymmetrical response. Because when you know that you lack the technology to go tank for tank, but you have to resist, you come up with other tactics. That's exactly who they are and what they've been.
Yeah. And I think again, this is about the destabilization of the Middle East. This is, obviously Syria was one to fall. You have President General in Egypt, the King of Jordan, who speaks Arabic with an English accent, UAE, Saudi Arabia, who just MBS had a photo just leaked with Epstein. I don't know if you saw that. You know what I mean? Yeah, but bad look. And the Arab world is in the Middle East. I mean, it's sort of being destabilized constantly. This is work that's been put in for several years, things that just didn't happen. And now, because of the Holocaust happening in Gaza right now, obviously major pushback from places like Yemen, places like Hezbollah, or at least in Lebanon, the Northern Resistance, Iran possibly being someone funding these things. But again, look at Iraq. Iraq is completely destabilized. And look where that region is, Syria, completely destabilized. Look where that region is. I wish I had a little map, so you could do your little thing about, your logistics and all these other things. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Very few Americans even know that Iraq's sovereign wealth is in American banks, right? You're talking about a nation with almost no national debt under the time of Saddam. Say what you want about Saddam. Iraq, the average Iraqi standard of living was significantly better. I laugh because these things are just true, and Americans don't even know these things. Like, the standard of living in Iraq was better under Saddam Hussein. The nation had almost no debt. They were so flush with petrol wealth that they were trying to create a gold-backed oil currency. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there's so many reasons that Saddam was killed that have nothing to do with what the average American thinks, right? I mean, you start fucking with the petrodollar and your days on this earth are very numbered. Like, are you Xi Jinping? So that's the reality, right? All of that wealth that existed in Iraq is gone. It's all in American banks now. So, they're still not free. Like, if the American army packed up and left tomorrow, which the Iraqis, by the way, have been voting for in the Standard of Forces Agreement every other year, Americans go home. Americans go home. All of these people say, oh, it was an unjust war. Well, okay, it's easy to say, but George W.'s unjust war lasted throughout his term. It lasted throughout Barack's term. It lasted throughout Trump's first term, through Biden's term, and now we're here in Trump's term again.
Yeah.
And the American soldiers are still there. So, if the American army isn't incompetent, which it isn't, you have to ask yourself, why is it they have not given up this land? And that goes back to the greater game that's been afoot. It's to make sure there are no ground land-based bridges between the Shia sphere of influence under Iran, right, all the way down to Israel. They want to have buffer states. Iraq was made a buffer state. Syria has been made into a buffer state. They want Lebanon to be a buffer state. Jordan is already a buffer state. That's just the reality of what it is. And again, this is not conspiracy theory. General Wesley Clark from Little Rock, Arkansas, said as much in 2007, and he added a couple of other countries to that list. Where attacks are happening to this day. These things aren't accidents. This isn't like, oh, Trump got mad and this thing happened, or Biden, he lost control of a situation. This is foreign policy, and foreign policy in the United States doesn't change no matter who the party is. These things are planned out decades in advance. And it's all about reading these papers where they're quite straightforward about what the goals of the American empire are and how they would be moving to achieve these goals.
Yeah, so let's pivot a little bit. Great, well said. I think we will be keeping people up to date on this, and obviously follow us on Inner City Left on Instagram so you guys can see a little bit more as we post on a daily basis. But there was something else that's been going on, and I want to just mention this if we can. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this little situation right here.
You're doing a great job,
Thank you so much. Encouragement is very
business.
I wish that was true. It might be. Okay, here we go. India. This is President Modi, President Lula. Guys, everyone's getting together over. Come together right now over tariffs. And I think that's kind of where it's going on here. India is signaling it may seek to rebalance its global partnership after Trump's salvo of tariffs on Indian goods. This is a picture of Modi and Lula. This is BRICS, Original Gangsters, a part of the acronym itself. What is happening with India? Why are we always hearing sort of, well, India's with BRICS, but also it's with the United States. Oh, it's with Russia, but also with the West. You know, where are we at right now with India, and what is to be won and lost by sort of, its allegiance, whether, long term or in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to remember about India is India. India plays a lot of games because India has a lot of power. And they recognize it. They say what you want about Modi, right? And him being a bit of an unreliable partner. The thing that he's been quite reliable for is India. You know, he's worked very hard to build up the Indian military industrial complex, though it's some shit, He's worked to keep the economy afloat, risking the ire of the Americans by buying petroleum from the lowest sources on Earth, which right now is the Russians. The cheapest. Yeah, cheapest, right? When I say lowest, I mean lowest price, right? No morality judgment, right? The cheapest oil.
Those low down, dirty Russians and their oil.
Right? Is Russia, right? So, the thing to understand about oil that I don't think most Americans do is that oil is the tax before all taxes. Everything you do is contingent on oil in this contemporary world, right? You go to work, you got to drive. That's gasoline, okay? You go to the grocery store, you got to drive there. And then the products that are there, they were drove there after they were flown there, after they were shipped there, right? All of that happens on petroleum. So when before anything happens in the economy at all, oil has been touched 3 to 4 times. You know what I'm saying? Before any task that you set out to do. Never mind. It also powers the electric grid. So when you can make the petroleum as cheap as possible, that's something you do to increase the standard of living for the people that live in your country. So what Modi has done, right, is continue to buy this very inexpensive Russian petroleum right now, which is a very high quality product. And he's been able to offset a great deal of the inflation that the Americans and the Europeans have been experiencing simply because they're choosing not to use this Russian oil and they're using other petroleums from places that are further away and thus more expensive. Plus, whenever you take a huge source of something off the market, everybody else is going to raise prices. If McDonald's went out of business tomorrow, Burger King, Wendy's, all those guys are going to charge more because they can. You know what I'm saying? Oil is the original cartel. When the Russian oil was taken out, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Americans, all was licking their chops because they knew they was going to have to fill in. You know what I'm saying? That you just can't take that much oil out of the world markets and not see some volatility. And that volatility was shown by increasing oil prices, which actually helped American businesses. It doesn't help American consumers, but it does help American businesses, But for Modi, the other thing about Modi that he's done, and they find this unforgivable, he bought huge excesses of Russian oil and sold it back to the Europeans at a profit. Y'all can't buy Russian oil. Well, this isn't Russian oil. This is Indian oil. Duh. See? You see this flag? Indian flag. There it is. And so they're buying it for cheap and selling it for high, which again is completely legal. the system was set up exactly for this thing to happen, not to doom, but like corruption. That's the whole point of it. You know what I'm saying? Like Syriana, corruption is why we win. The global markets would have went truly into shock if no one was able to buy Russian oil anywhere. Because what would have happened was it would have been a bidding frenzy, right, from the countries, because you just cannot miss that much oil, right? That has to be accounted for. So they had to have a mechanism to allow that oil to really flow through the markets anyway. And India was that market that was set up under the Bidens, and it was actually seen as like a release valve for the Europeans, like, oh, so they won't be totally out in the cold. No pun intended, quite literally, so they won't be out in the cold, but Trump has come in. He doesn't like it. He's torn up the whole deal. And Modi, who has done a really good job of balancing between the East and the West, he's being given no outs, and he's a prideful man. Like anybody that's done a cursory glance of Modi should understand this man is a Hindu nationalist to his core, and he wants to be respected as a man, and he should be, right? Like him or don't like him, this man is the leader of the world's most populous country. That's a man.
And they voted for him. That's a man that you must respect on the grounds of that alone, right? The Europeans wouldn't sell this man military technology for a long time. And that forced them to buy Russian military technology while they were developing their own, nascent kind of Indian military industrial complex. But now to hurt the Russians, the Americans are like, well, no, we will sell to you. Buy these F-35s, which everybody in the world knows the problems with the F-35 program, and the American government's just going out of its way to keep Boeing afloat, which you should ask yourself, should that even be the job of the American government, like to ensure that the Boeing shareholders are winning, right? Except that so many of them are government employees. So, former government employees, right. or former, they say you can never be a former CIA. They're not really a former government employee or former. It's like what happens when you don't win an election. Like you've been the senator for a few years, you didn't win an election. Well, hey, you're going to get a job at Boeing or Northrop Grumman or
we'll put you on the board.
Yeah, why not? It's easy money, baby. Yeah, use your influence. We don't need you to know anything.
Right. And so, these guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars hands over fist. You know what I'm saying? That's why they love a guy like Zelensky, a guy that's like, oh, I'm just trying to get this money.
Let's wash the money. Let's get it clean. Rolls Royces for everybody.
He's their kind of guy, but like at the end of the day, you do actually have to be able to build some of these products. The Americans were able for decades, I might add, to get by on this notion of American military superiority. One, because they bought the most and spent the most. But two, because America is a nuclear armed superpower. So it behooves most people not to even try American military technology. But now you're going up against near peer and peer adversaries that whether or not they want to try American military have been forced to try the American military. And they're seeing where the weaknesses in these systems are. And the weaknesses of the F-35 is just well known. I mean, when you got even what's weirdo Matt Gaetz, calling it a paperweight in Congress, you know what I'm saying? Right before the allegations hit.
I think it was right after the allegations hit, actually. Oh, okay. Which might make it worse. I don't know. I don't know if it's better or worse.
Right. Either way, scorched earth one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about this because this is a product of sanctions, right? Can't sanction 60% of the world's population and now have these, sort of weird negotiations because it's like, well, I can't buy gas from Russia, but they have the most gas and they're right there and it's very cheap and it works for our country. But, it works for the economy of our country much better than trying to go your way, and I think that's the thing. It's not just that the United States is not offering anything, it's just do what we say or will be very upset. And
They're
the
offering
deals
the
that
same product, it's just way more expensive.
yeah, and the deals that are being made by the West, if you look at Japan, if you look at the EU, not good for the other partners in those situations. So if I am, a place like India, and I'm looking and going, okay, wait a minute, what's happening here? Because I have to do what's best for my country and for my people. Another thing that you said that I wanted to touch on is, we get comments like this, and I don't know if they're real, where people be like, oh, Modi's a fascist. Modi's a fascist. But when we talk about geopolitics and we talk about like the leader of a nation, like I'm not supporting him. I'm not saying that what happens to Muslims in India is like, not in direct influence of Hindu nationalism brought to you by Modi. It is just to acknowledge, like, in the world of geopolitics, we would rather have India be on the side of BRICS because this hurts global imperialism that the West delivers. So it's not that I'm like saying, oh, we love Modi and we this. It's like, this is just the reality of what's happening. And again, the biggest election in human history was done in India over, I believe, a 6-week period. So again, I'm not saying that I'm a fan of Modi or whatever, but he is a duly elected leader. And, he was voted on by more people than anyone in human history. So just have and take that with a sort of a grain of salt, because this is what we mean when we talk about geopolitics, the benefit of the world. And BRICS is a great counterbalance to the G7 in the West and global hegemony from white supremacy. So this is what's at stake here.
The other thing I would say about India is, and this goes to where the cult of personality behind certain presidents, I think, can actually impact negatively against the stated goals of the empire. Because think about how long the empire has worked to court and woo India, you know what I'm saying, to pull them away from this BRICS orbit. And then actions like this, you know what I'm saying, they reinforce the Indian urge to settle down with Russia and with China and with Brazil and to consider what a different world looks like. I will say one thing, though. The F-35 is not really the game changer, right? Them choosing not to get the F-35, even though they reportedly chose to get the Russian Su-57 Felon, which is their 5th generation fighter jet. The real story to me will be if they cancel the nuclear submarine deal, because America's wet dream is to unleash India against China. That's the only real way they can see war with China in a way where they can win, right? Outnumber the Chinese, overrun them. And there's really no real hope to do that without India. But the thing is, it's not the F-35 that would have made that possible. It would have been strikes, right? The whole Quad alliance with Japan and Australia and the United States and India, you know what I'm saying? Like, and let's also be honest, Britain's in on that too. That's the way, that's their way in, so like, while Trump is, creating all these bellicose, situations, the F-35 deal, they lost that. I see that as a warning. But like, if India goes against the Quad alliance, that will really be at the moment that they've picked a side that can't be walked away from. At that point, they're saying, you can no longer count on us militarily to be utilized as a force against China. And that has not happened yet. Like, Modi has quite shrewdly played, he's just taking a step closer to China. But both doors are open. He's given the Americans a chance to correct themselves, and that's clever. Like, you have to give Modi this credit. It doesn't behoove him to jump into bed one way or the other with either side, because what's best for China and what's best for America is not necessarily what's best for India. And he is obligated to think about what is best for India. India's best move is to stay the fuck out of this as long as they can, Yeah. The Singapore model.
Yeah. We'll just have to see. Honestly, these situations are fluid, and BRICS is fluid, we don't know exactly, what BRICS is going to look like in 3 to 5 years, and there's a lot up in the air. So this is just the best we can do. We're doing the best we can to, conclude the proper things with the information that we have, the raw data. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Watch, all that good stuff. Check out our Podbean site and check out our site, innercityleft.com. You can check out Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins, book of poetry by Emoja Sumler. Check out our music, Lil Tanky, everywhere you find music. Amin TMK, search us, give us a stream, give us a purchase. We trying to live out here, patreon.com/innercityleft. 99. We're looking for that 100th member, y'all. So, we also have free memberships and things like that. Support if you can. We appreciate y'all so much. Tanky, my friend, thoughts, feelings. What do we miss?
I just
Weekend
want
plans.
to spend the last couple of seconds of this broadcast shaming the fuck out of every liberal who wanted to act like Palestine was a single issue. Like genocide is not a big enough deal to stop something for, especially now that Netanyahu has out and out said, I'm going to annex to Gaza, which is what all of the leftists have been saying since this began. And I just, again, if we lived in a respectable world, you know what I'm saying? Japanese, man, seppuku, man, because y'all out here leading the people in the wrong way. Follow your sword, man. Y'all is wrong.
There's no honor. There's no pride. There's no respect amongst so many of these politicians, man. They're just grifters to the end, ideologues to the end.
I'm talking about the little influencers, all these little liberals out here with their little conversations about, how we need to move forward and build coalition. I don't expect the politicians to have no. I'm talking about these weak ass influencers. This for y'all. Fall on your swords.
Wow, there it is. Vote third party. You know what it is. We don't get down with Democrats, Republicans. We don't get down with that. Much love to y'all. Inner City Left broadcast. I'm Amin TMK. That is Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. And peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.